Dear guests, I have the honor to pass the floor, although virtually, to a keynote speaker today, Sir Suma Chakrabarti, former president of the EBRD, advisor to the presidents of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan on economic development and effective governance, and the chairman of ODI Global. Sir Suma, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Economy, broadly defined, accounted for 15.5% of global GDP. Most likely this share has actually significantly increased since then. And we know that over the next 10 years, 9 out of 10 jobs will require digital skills. So digital transition has therefore become a key policy focus for many countries, for many corporations, and of course, international organizations. The digital economy has created bridges. It's transformed the way businesses operate and the way consumers obtain goods, services, and information. Most goods and services have now become digital and can be purchased online. Just some examples from our daily lives. Buying food. We used to go to the supermarket, but now we can order it online and get it delivered to our homes within hours. We used to buy or rent DVD discs to watch our favorite movies. Now we just rely on streaming services to watch movies on our laptops, our tablets, and our smartphones. We used to wait for personal meetings, and we used to fly to each other for a 30-minute meeting. Now, with borders closed at the height of the pandemic, we started to talk to each other much more often, in part because we had the necessary digital tools to hold most of the meetings online. Remote and hybrid working is becoming the new normal. Local entrepreneurs, I think digitalization helped us adapt to the crisis. It helped reduce significantly the negative impact of lockdowns on our personal and our professional lives. Now, at the same time, I would really like to stress that the digital economy is not a panacea. As with many things in life, it offers great advantages, but it also carries risks and disadvantages. As such, it's got to be introduced and used responsibly, understanding the implications and learning from experience. I personally very strongly believe that human contact, personal meetings, empathy will maintain their importance, will be central to our personal and professional lives going forward. Now, as we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated digital transition. The present and future are becoming much more digital. I'm not sure which aspects of digitalization will prevail in the future, and I'm not sure consequently how our personal and professional lives will look. But I am confident that the digital economy is part of the solution to a wider range of global issues that have piled up in the world, from poor development of human capital to inequality. Our top priority has got to be to build an inclusive digital future that works for the benefit of society. But today, we still see many wide gaps in access, in use, and skills for digital technology. The pandemic has raised the bar for the digital transition. It's highlighted the need to close the digital divide that risks leaving some people and some firms worse off than others in a post-COVID world. Now, there are a number of pressing issues, all of them interrelated, that we've got to tackle to close that digital divide. The first challenge is infrastructure. The digital economy depends on systems and infrastructure that enables interconnectedness of people, of organizations, and of machines. With rapid digital transition, demand for infrastructure has risen very significantly. The internet has become as important to our daily lives as electricity, water, and roads. However, the current level of supply is not keeping pace with rising demand. According to the World Economic Forum, 47% of the world's population, nearly half, does not have access to the internet. Behind this fact is a global digital infrastructure financing gap that's rising significantly, and it's estimated to reach $974 billion by 2040. As a result, many people are not benefiting fully from the rise of the digital economy. The second area, the second challenge to be addressed is education. We all know that the quality and availability of education varies among and within countries. According to the World Bank, 53% of children in low and middle income countries cannot read, cannot understand a simple story by the end of primary school. This means that we're not creating equal opportunities for people to grow and pursue their goals. And this problem was greatly exacerbated by the pandemic, when schools and higher education institutions were mostly closed for their last academic year. Remote education had to be introduced. But unfortunately, not everyone was ready for remote study. School children, especially those from disadvantaged families or living in rural areas, did not have access to the internet. Schools were not equipped properly, and teachers did not have the necessary digital skills. As a result, learning loss has become a widespread problem, which poses a risk to the future of a whole generation. According to a recent McKinsey report, in some countries, children's learning losses could be up to 6 months because of the school shutdowns in just the second quarter of 2020. More broadly, I think we need to address the question of human capital. The digital economy is here to stay, but with new services and enhanced products entering the market every year, that digital environment is changing rapidly. Because of this, a service that is popular one day can rapidly lose relevance. The same applies to the skills and knowledge of people. Again, according to the World Economic Forum, 54% of employees will require significant reskilling by 2022. To stay on top of rapid changes, we need people with the right skills, the right knowledge, who can adjust to new market demands quickly. Meeting this gap may seem like a rather costly endeavor, but we shouldn't ignore the fact that closing the global skills gap could also add about $11.5 trillion to global GDP by 2028. Now, brain drain is, of course, another significant problem in many countries. The main reason why high-skilled people leave their home countries is that they simply can't apply their skills and knowledge there, and that they're also dissatisfied with their standard of living. According to the Gallup World Poll Survey, 15% of the adult population of CIS countries would like to move permanently to another country if they had the opportunity to do that. So developing countries losing their top talent to developed countries in this way, I think also contributes to the growing inequality between nations. These factors exacerbate further the relatively low level of human capital in many developing countries. Fourth, we need to tackle inequality. It's a huge problem, a huge challenge. Inequality is more evident in booming economies, of course, where resources and incomes are not equally distributed among the various sections of the population. Increasing inequality in countries across the world has become a pressing issue, and this was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, which hit the most vulnerable the hardest. Now, inequality is a complex issue. It relates, of course, to the level of income of different groups, but it also relates to access to services such as education, healthcare, infrastructure, housing, finance, and other areas too, and access to opportunities too. Inequalities can also exist across different types of groups within society, such as between people living in different regions, across different age groups, and between men and women. According to the IMF, the post-COVID average Gini coefficient for emerging market and developing economies will rise to 42.7. That's comparable to the level it was at in 2008. So this rise represents an increase in inequality and a reversal of the gains achieved after the global financial crisis. And unfortunately, the digital economy has also contributed to higher income inequality. The distribution of income has become more unequal, with corporations benefiting significantly more than employees. Policy failures are, I think, also an important part of the story here. Policymakers have not yet been able to adjust regulations, including labor, in tax, in competition, in a timely manner. They just haven't been able to do that to respond to the rapid changes that came from the digital economy. The failure to adjust those policies has also allowed some inequalities to worsen. And fifth, we need to work much, much harder to achieve gender equality. The pandemic had a significantly negative impact on women's lives, and it's led to a devastatingly negative impact on already wide gender gaps. During strict lockdowns of schools, childcare and other social facilities closed, women took much more of the burden of looking after their children and other close ones. This resulted in women leaving their jobs, losing the opportunity to advance their careers and earn income, and having their knowledge and work skills eroded. And unfortunately, many new jobs created by the digital economy are being taken largely by men. Another related problem, of course, is the digital gender gap. Globally, women and girls use the internet 12.5% less than men and boys. The gap continues to widen in many developing countries, creating a very specific need to support digital gender equality. Now, clearly, that's not an exhaustive list of challenges, but those challenges that I've set out, I think, bear witness to the complexity of the problem that we're facing and show, I think, if we didn't know it before, how the digital transition is related to wider social and economic issues. So let me turn to the actions that we need to take to ensure that the digital economy benefits everybody equally and addresses those challenges. Addressing those issues is not the sole responsibility of those in the digital economy, but it's for everyone, for all stakeholders, for governments, for the private sector, for international organizations, and for citizens. First of all, government policies have to be focused on building the necessary infrastructure so that people, including in remote rural areas, benefit equally and have the opportunity to be involved in the digital economy. So that means digital infrastructure also needs to protect the privacy and security of citizens and be based on the principles of accountability and transparency. That is all going to need substantial investment, and it can't be done by governments alone. Indeed, it's also necessary to incentivize the private sector, multilateral development banks, to invest in building this infrastructure. The second solution is it's necessary to adjust and constantly update our education systems and curricula for this fast-changing reality. We need to do this in our schools first, but we also need to promote lifelong learning and incentivize companies to invest in their employees. We also need to support firms in improving their ability to anticipate new skill needs, including by drawing insights from labour market trends. In terms of access to education, EdTech, which uses IT tools and educational theory and practice to facilitate learning, could, I believe, potentially be one of the solutions. Importantly, EdTech has to be tailored for the specific needs of the countries and regions. The third solution, given the complexity, I think to tackling inequality must be comprehensive and market-led, with a focus on more sustainable and inclusive policies across all areas, rather than simple handouts to the population. Let me stress that inequality can be reduced with policies and incentives that are more responsive to the new dynamics of the digital economy. It's a fast-changing area, and governments have more work to do to reflect changes in the labour market into actual policy. We also need to learn to use the digital economy to level the playing field, given its capacity to make goods, services, and information more accessible. And fourth, to close that gap in gender equality, it's necessary to give women and girls much, much greater access to the internet and the skills to use digital technologies. In this way, we should be able to provide women with better opportunities to start new businesses, to sell products in new markets, to find better paid jobs, and access education, health, financial services, as well as to enhance their participation in public life and improve information exchange. Now, these measures have to be supplemented with collecting high-quality gender and age disaggregated data to evaluate and design policies that can address gender gaps in the digital economy. Fifth, since we live in a globalized world, it's absolutely vital to have effective mechanisms for mutually beneficial international cooperation so that countries can discuss and learn from each other on how to design and implement digitalization strategies and policies. It's also important that the international community provides financial and technical support to developing countries, to emerging markets, to ensure that they can develop their capacities to create and capture the value of data domestically. And sixth, it's critical, truly critical, to address remaining problems related to the collection of personal data, cybersecurity, connectivity and infrastructure, and the dependence on centralized services. Given that we cannot rely too much on a limited number of companies, competition policies will need to be revamped quickly in the digital age. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear colleagues, making the digital transition needs to be added to the list of transition challenges. At EBRD, when I was president, we modernized the concept of transition to be about much more than just competitiveness. We added the need for transition economies to be well governed, to be green, to be inclusive, to be resilient, and to be integrated. Now, whether digital transition is a seventh transition quality or a concept that cuts across all the others, well, that's a good question for the economic philosophers. I just know that this subject cannot be ignored, which is why I was delighted to see that it is at the heart of the EBRD's next 5-year strategy and the subject of its coming transition report and a new paper on the approach to digital transition. Digital transition is no longer the coming agenda. It has arrived. Time to move from thinking about it to doing everything we can to ensure digital transition benefits the many, not the few. I hope your discussions today and tomorrow put us all on the road to doing just that. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. So it was Sir Suma Chakrabarti. He's a former president of the EBRD. He's advisor to the president of Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan on economic development and effective governance. Chairman of ODI Global. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good luck with all your discussions today and tomorrow.
Thank you. Dear ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to say that we have one more speaker tonight for the opening ceremony. This is a surprise speaker, let's say. Please greet, and I'm giving a floor to Jonathan Tower. Jonathan, are you here? Perfect. Jonathan Tower, he's a managing partner at Catapult Venture Fund from Silicon Valley. He will share his vision of investments in emerging markets and some very, very, very good news for the Kyrgyz Republic and Central Asia as a whole. Please welcome.
Thanks very much. So I'll try to move this fairly quickly through these slides because we kind of put it together pretty much last minute, but I think it gives you a sense about what we think about the region, some of the opportunities here, and why I'm spending a lot of time here now. So Catapult is a global seed stage platform. Silicon Valley is everywhere now, and we believe that Central Asia is well positioned to be a dominant tech hub for the broader region. Where we're going, we are actually announcing a fund for Eurasia called Catapult Eurasia 1, and it's really formed to leverage our deep relationships in Central Asia to fund startups from the region and startups that have a clear interest in the region as well. And the fund, like the theme of this conference, is really a collaboration between us as a venture fund based in Silicon Valley and with US MAC, which is arguably the most prestigious and the best. And we've returned more than $1 billion to our investors. And this is notable, not markups, not paper gains, actual cash-on-cash returns back to our investors through M&A. And so we've sold companies to the who's who of the Silicon Valley ecosystem: Apple, Cisco, Facebook, Google, Adobe, you name it. We probably have sold a company to that company over the years. And of course, in the process of doing so, built up the relationships with a lot of those organizations. We have 16 companies currently in our portfolio that we seeded that are now worth more than $1 billion, in some cases 10 or 15 billion dollars. And we've consistently invested with the best VC funds in the industry. And this is a very important part of our model, which is to connect these hubs with Silicon Valley and Boston and New York and London, where 90% of all the venture money still tends to flow. More than 80% of the companies that we have invested in have gone on to raise capital from some of the names on this slide, and that's more than 275 co-investors. And I think we've done this because we built a reputation over 15 years as a trusted feeder fund to top-tier VCs. The The names in the left-hand side of this slide are all companies that we were the very first check in that then went on to raise capital from NEA, Battery Ventures, Andreessen Horowitz, all those names that you probably recognize. So why did we form this fund? Well, I can boil it down to about 4 core macro trends, and I'm sure we'll hear a lot of it in the next couple of days. Obviously, the one big one being this post-pandemic digital transformation and the impact that this is having on emerging tech hubs. I say the second theme is around, again, a trend that was not new, but that pandemic essentially poured gasoline on, which was this concept of remote workforce revolution. As I mentioned earlier, our idea of geography is being transformed, and of course that affects the workplace and how we think about work and how we think about physical spaces. And now we are seeing a trend where more and more startups are global day one. In other words, they may have an office in New York, they may have an office in Tbilisi for that matter, but they have development in the Ukraine, they've got a call center in Kuala Lumpur, they have another team in Houston, Texas. They're already global day one. Venture capital has to keep pace with that. I see the third theme is the rise of these smaller tech hubs that are now beginning to rival Silicon Valley for talent, innovation, and that's absolutely been accelerated by the pandemic. And then fourth and finally, the growth in the Eurasian ecosystem, which we think is very encouraging. So the opportunity is pretty clear. The digital transformation is indeed global. We think we're in the second or third inning, as we say in baseball, in this theme. And it's transforming every vertical that you can think of, from finance to education to medicine. Nothing has been spared this sort of digital transformation. So everybody's racing to sort of join this movement and realize how can they stay competitive in this new environment. And of course, unicorns break out from everywhere now. This is no longer just a Silicon Valley phenomenon. And this makes investing in Eurasia very attractive. We talk a lot about the lower cost, we talk a lot about the lower valuations. That's obvious from an investor perspective, but there's also other elements, that the importance of talent, the importance of team attrition in a company, and not having to constantly replace your team because they're being poached by Facebook or Google or Adobe. That's not quite an issue in some of the smaller markets. That means teams stay together longer, that's good for the company, and that produces some significant outcomes. We think now is the right time to be investing in Eurasia. What we're seeing is the quality of Eurasian startups are getting better every cohort, every year. Eurasian startups are now beginning to emerge and capture the attention of global investors. Although the figures are small by Silicon Valley standards, the startups are beginning to exit now, and that's capturing attention from global investors who are now beginning to look at markets like Central Asia. As we talked about, this region boasts very low operating costs, very reasonable valuations, which gives funds like ours leverage on our capital and the ability to have more meaningful ownership in the companies in which we invest. Startups from more expensive markets are beginning to look at Central Asia as a place to hire, as a place to build a team, and that's a very important part of ecosystem development. And I think it's the attractive combination of lifestyle, location, geography that makes this particular area the ability to be a dominant tech hub for the region and competitive with Eastern Europe and Asia in the years ahead. So the conclusion is that we think this is the right time to launch a venture fund in this marketplace. We believe we'll have a first mover advantage as the very first Silicon Valley-based venture fund to have a physical presence here in the region and build a critical bridge to Silicon Valley, which is essential for companies coming out of this region to achieve global scale. Our strategy is very straightforward. We invest at seed and at early stage in these types of companies. We like to invest fairly small initially, but have a lot of follow-on capital to continue to support our best companies and to make sure that they get to some level of global scale. We focus on themes that are specifically designed to be successful post-pandemic, and this covers 3 core sections or sectors where we've been investing traditionally. So e-commerce, marketplaces clearly are one, digital transformation of the enterprise is another, and then frontier tech, which encompasses everything from machine learning, artificial intelligence, fintech, and robotics. What we look for? We look for companies coming from the region that have the ability to become global and globally competitive. We like to work with markets that are billion-dollar markets that are ripe for disruption, with entrepreneurs that are mission-driven and have a lofty vision. We like to take advantage of the cost and valuation arbitrage of these smaller markets for reasons that we already covered in this presentation. We like businesses that are inherently capital efficient. We like companies that have the ability to navigate this post-pandemic environment. And then for us as a firm, we want to make sure that we have meaningful ownership and the ability to drive terms. Our portfolio matriculation model is very straightforward. We believe we'll back about 50 to 75 companies in this fund. And we believe out of that portfolio, we should have 2 to 3 IPOs and about 20 companies that will exit via M&A. And that will hopefully get us to the 4 times return on capital that we target for the fund. We are building a global platform. As I mentioned earlier, we now have boots on the ground in 12 markets in North America and Europe, 6 markets in North America, and 6 markets in Europe. And with this fund, it will be the ability for us to plant the flag in this region with one office to start with, but with the ability to expand across the region in due course in this fund. The fund particulars are very straightforward. It is a standard venture capital fund with an 8 to 10 year time horizon, roughly a 5-year investment horizon. As I mentioned before, we have a very established team, both on the venture side and also on the deal curation, origination, and mentorship side. And so, in summation, we are a $50 million fund focused on investing in the region. We have delivered top decile returns in our careers. We have also demonstrated access to not only great companies, but also with great venture firms with which we can collaborate. We are executing on a differentiated strategy of focusing principally upon startups coming out of the region. We are focused on those startups that have technologies that are positioned to succeed in this post-pandemic economy that we are inheriting. And we have many co-invest opportunities for our investors as those companies that we invest at seed stage get to a level of scale and we can put more capital to work. So if you're interested in partnering with a fund that is passionate about emerging tech hubs and believes in the future of Central Asia, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for your time.